The oak door of my penthouse apartment swung open, and I froze. Everything inside me stopped. My breath, my heartbeat, the hands I've been holding steady for 3 years. Claire was on my Italian leather sofa, her back arched against the cushions, her emerald dress pooling around her like spilled wine. His hands, the CEO's hands, traced the curve of her spine with practiced precision. Marcus Webb, 42, charismatic, dangerous. The man who'd made it abundantly clear that I didn't belong in his sphere. Their lips met slowly, intimately, as if they had all the time in the world, as if my entire universe wasn't collapsing in that single moment. She pulled back, her dark eyes finding mine, and smiled. Not the apologetic smile of someone caught. Not even the guilty smile of a woman conflicted between two men. It was the smile of a predator who'd won. Elliot. She said my name like it was a joke. You came home early. I couldn't speak. My hands gripped the doorframe until my knuckles turned white, the wood biting into my palms. He can give me everything you never could, she continued, her voice a honey-smooth tone she reserved for manipulation. She sat up slowly, deliberately, like a cat stretching. Marcus kept his hand on her back, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on me, assessing, dismissive. Love is beautiful, Elliot, but love doesn't pay for penthouse apartments. Love doesn't open doors at the top of Manhattan's elite. You were comfortable, buddies, everything. Marcus smiled, a cold slash of white teeth. She's quite something, isn't she? His tone suggested I was a minor inconvenience, a problem already solved. I stood there, drowning in the air of their cologne and perfume and certainty, and I whispered the only thing I could manage. You'll regret this. Claire laughed, that soft, mocking sound that cut deeper than any weapon. No, Elliot, I won't. But she was wrong. In that moment, devastated and broken, I began to see the truth. Her arrogance wasn't strength. It was a flaw. And flaws, I was about to learn, could be weaponized. 3 weeks later, I walked into Morrison & Associates at 6 a.m., before the cleaning crew left, before the coffee was brewed, before the world woke up. For 3 years, I'd been senior marketing strategist. Competent, invisible, I'd buried myself in work, while Claire built her empire of charm and connections. Her father, Richard Chun, was a company CFO, and family loyalty had always trumped merit in his eyes. That ended today. I'd spent the last 3 weeks doing something I should have done long ago. I'd stopped trying to prove myself to them. Instead, I'd started proving myself to the people who actually mattered, the ones beneath Claire's notice. That morning, I had breakfast with James Ricci, our head of operations. We discussed quarterly projections over strong coffee at a small cafe near his apartment. He was, I discovered, a widower with 3 kids who believed in hard work and loyalty. He'd spent 8 years watching Claire take credit for other people's ideas. He was hungry to see someone who actually deserved to succeed. By noon, I'd had 3 separate conversations with junior staff members who'd been humiliated by Claire, people she belittled and gaslit over the years. They didn't know I was gathering their stories. They just knew I was the only senior person who'd ever actually listened to them. Claire arrived at 9 a.m., as she always did, dressed in Prada and perfume, her arm linked through Marcus Webb's. She moved through the office like she owned it. She probably thought she did. Her father had been grooming her for a VP position. Marcus had been dropping hints about opportunities at his investment firm. Everything was falling into place for her. Darling, I have that board meeting, Marcus said, kissing her cheek in front of everyone. Lunch at Nobu at 1? I want to discuss that merger. Of course, Claire purred, and I watched from my desk as she glanced in my direction, her eyes glittering with that same cruel triumph from 3 weeks ago. I smiled at my computer screen. She didn't realize I'd already spoken to 3 board members who had serious questions about her marketing proposal. And I certainly had mentioned that I'd spent the last week personally rebuilding that proposal using data analysis she completely missed. Data that would save the company millions. The morning unfolded like a meticulously orchestrated symphony. In a status meeting, Claire presented her proposal with characteristic confidence. She'd done the bare minimum of work, relying on her charm and her father's influence to carry her through. I think, I said quietly, raising my hand. There's something we should examine more closely. The demographic data here is from 2022. If we use current consumer psychology models, we actually get a different picture. I pulled up my analysis, the one I'd been building in the evenings after she'd left the office, the one that proved her entire strategy was flawed. The numbers didn't lie. The silence that fell over the conference room was exquisite. Claire's face flushed, not with shame, but with rage. Her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her papers. Her father's expression shifted, just slightly, from pride to calculation. That's interesting, she said tightly. But I've already presented this to Marcus, and... Actually, I haven't approved it yet, said James Ricci, our head of operations, whom I briefed that morning. Not until we explore Elliot's analysis. This is solid work. Really solid. I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply presented the truth, calmly and clearly, and let reality do the rest. That was the first brick in the fortress I was building. Over the next 6 months, everything changed. My real mentor at the company was someone Claire had never bothered to learn the name of, Dr. Bernard Livingston, a senior advisor in his 60s who'd been quietly running strategy for 20 years. He'd started paying attention to my work after that board meeting. He began inviting me to lunch, offering advice, introducing me to contacts. You have something she doesn't, he told me one afternoon over chess and whiskey in his corner office. We'd fallen into the habit of playing every Thursday. Authenticity. She builds castles of smoke. You build structures of stone. Bernard wasn't a mentor in the traditional sense. He was something rarer. A man who genuinely wanted to see competence rewarded. He'd watched Claire manipulate and undermine for years. He'd watched her humiliate assistants and steal ideas. And he'd decided, I think, that the universe could use a little correction. Through Bernard, I was introduced to Marcus Chun, no relation to Claire's father, despite the shared last name, who ran a boutique consulting firm. Then to Priya Kapoor, a venture capitalist with connections that stretched across 3 continents. Then to David Foster, who'd built 3 successful startups and had a reputation for spotting talent. Each introduction came with Bernard's quiet endorsement. Elliot Barrett. Watch him. And they did. Meanwhile, Claire was busy unraveling her own threads. I watched from a careful distance as she underperformed on project after project, as she gaslit a young junior analyst named Sophie, telling her she'd made mistakes she hadn't made, as she went to her father's office and lied about my contribution to the quarterly report, trying to take credit while deflecting blame. I didn't confront any of it. I simply documented it. Every mistake went into a mental file. Every lie, carefully noted. Every moment where her arrogance overrode her judgment. I wasn't collecting ammunition. I was simply observing the self-destructive patterns of someone who believed themselves untouchable. How do you stay so calm around her? Sophie asked me one afternoon. She was sitting in my office, eyes red from crying because Claire had told her, falsely, that she was being considered for termination. I learned something. I told her, and I meant it. You can't control what other people do. You can only control what you do. So I decided to be the opposite of her. Where she's cruel, I'm kind. Where she's dishonest, I'm transparent. Where she's reactive, I'm strategic. And eventually, the world notices a difference. Sophie nodded slowly, and I watched something settle in her expression. Permission, maybe, to stop accepting Claire's narrative about her. That mattered. That was important. Because people like Claire depend on silence. They thrive on shame. And Sophie was no longer willing to carry either. 8 months into my quiet revolution, the critical project arrived. Meridian Industries, a major potential client, was considering a partnership with Morrison and Associates. The contract was worth $16 million over 3 years. Claire, naturally, assumed it would be hers to lead. Her father gave to both of us, hedging his bets, trying to keep the peace in the family, while also acknowledging that something had shifted in the company's perception of me. "You'll lead together," Richardson told us, in a tone that suggested this would be a meaningful compromise. It wasn't. Claire had learned nothing about strategic compromise. She saw collaboration as weakness. Within the first week, She'd frozen me out of meetings, claiming they were exploratory and preliminary. Within the second week, she was presenting her ideas to the client without me present. Ideas that, frankly, were mediocre at best. I let her do it. I sent my notes to James Ricci. I scheduled my own meeting with the client's head of operations, David Mueller, and I presented what I've been working on, a comprehensive strategy that addressed not just their immediate needs, but their 3-year growth trajectory. I did this quietly, without mentioning Claire's approach at all. "This is remarkable," David Mueller told me, leaning back in his leather chair, his expression shifting from polite interest to genuine engagement. "How long did this take you to develop?" 6 weeks, I said. "I've been thinking about your industry, your market position, and where the intersection of your assets and emerging trends converge. This strategy isn't just about the next 3 years. It's about positioning you for the next decade." David Mueller had been a CEO for 15 years. He recognized sophisticated thinking when he saw it. He also recognized when someone was trying to outmaneuver their colleague. "Is this going to create a conflict?" he asked directly. "No," I said simply. "But I think you should have both proposals. Then you can decide what you need." That honest answer, I would later learn, was what won him over. When Claire found out that I'd met with a client independently, she'd erupted. Not in my presence. Claire was too controlled for that. But in the office, she'd gone her father in a fury. "He's trying to sabotage me." I heard her shouting through the thin walls of Richard Chen's office. "He's going around me to the client." "He's probably doing his job," Richard had replied, and there was something in his tone, something tired, something wary, that told me a crucial line had been crossed. Her father had begun to see her clearly. 2 weeks later, Meridian Industries awarded the contract exclusively to my strategy. The email came directly to me, copying James Ricci, copying Bernard Livingston, and notably, not copying Claire. "We want to work with a strategist who understands our vision." David Mueller had written, "Elliot's proposal is precisely what we need. When can we begin?" I sat at my desk, reading that email 3 times, and I felt nothing. No triumph. No joy, just the cold satisfaction of something working exactly as planned. Claire felt it differently. 3 months later, Morrison & Associates held its annual gala at the Plaza Hotel. It was a kind of event where power was displayed openly, where people wore their success like armor and their influence like cologne. Claire arrived on Marcus Webb's arm, wearing a couture gown that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. She was still beautiful. Still confident. But there was a brilliance to it now, a desperation carefully masked by diamonds and charm. Marcus was already losing interest. I'd heard it through Bernard's network. There were whispers about his attention being captured by a younger venture capitalist from London. Claire had served her purpose in his life, the beautiful woman who'd added a certain cachet to his image. But Marcus Webb, I'd learned, collected beautiful women like other men collected cars. He replaced them every season. She didn't know that yet. I was standing near the bar, talking with David Mueller and Priya Kapoor about the Meridian Industries rollout, which was crushing all projections, when the evening centerpiece arrived. Bernard had arranged it, though he'd been subtle about it. He'd suggested to the event coordinator that the gala include a presentation of this year's outstanding achievement, a new category that would showcase a professional achievement that best represented the company's values of integrity, innovation, and impact. The presentation scrolled across the massive screen at the front of the ballroom. Meridian Industries, a case study in strategic vision. They showed the results, the revenue projections, the 3-year plan, the brilliant strategic framework that had won us the biggest contract in company history. And they showed my name, Elliot Barrett, lead strategist. The room burst into applause, genuine, enthusiastic applause from people who understood what they were seeing. A major win, a perfect execution, a strategy that had worked flawlessly from conception to implementation. Claire's face went white. I watched her, and I saw the exact moment she understood. This wasn't a project she could steal from me. This wasn't work I could be erased from. This was a victory too public, too massive, too obviously mine to be rewritten. Marcus turned to her with the look of a man who just realized his beautiful companion had become a liability. "Congratulations to Elliot Barrett," announced James Ricci from the stage, where he stood beaming with genuine pride. His work has exceeded every expectation and set a new standard for this company. The applause swelled. People turned to find me in the crowd, nodding, smiling. Bernard caught my eye and winked. Claire excused herself and walked toward the restroom, but not before I saw something I'd never seen on her face before. Genuine fear. The next 6 weeks happened quickly. Claire's father, finally seeing his daughter clearly, had a difficult conversation with her about her future at the company. It ended with her being transferred to a different division, a lateral move that was carefully constructed to save face publicly, but was, in reality, a deliberate removal from the power structure she tried to dominate. Marcus ended their relationship via text message while she was in a board meeting, a cruelty that made me almost feel something approaching pity for her. Her friends, sensing the shift in her fortunes, became suddenly unavailable. She'd spent so much time undermining and manipulating them that when it became clear she was no longer the ascendant power in the room, they simply drifted away. It's strange, watching someone lose everything they built on a foundation of manipulation. It happened slowly, then all at once. She hadn't actually lost her intelligence or her beauty or her talent. She'd lost the narrative. People had finally stopped believing her story about herself. And that, I was learning, was everything. She came to my office on a Tuesday morning in October. 6 months to the day after she destroyed me on my own sofa, she walked back into my life. She looked smaller somehow, less polished. Her hair wasn't perfectly styled. Her makeup was doing its best to hide that she hadn't slept well in weeks. She wore a dress that was probably Prada, but it didn't fit her confidence the way it once had. "Can we talk?" she asked, and her voice was not steady. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat down slowly, and I watched as the woman who told me I could never give her everything struggled to find her words. "I'm sorry," she said finally, and the words seemed to cost her something. "I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for everything." I waited. I didn't fill the silence. I didn't make it easy for her. Marcus left me. My friends. She swallowed hard. And my father. He said that I'd spent so much time trying to prove I belonged in the business that I forgot to actually earn it. He said you earned it. Actually earned it. She looked at me, and there were tears in her eyes. I think I might have made a terrible mistake. I could have said many things in that moment. I could have thrown her cruelty back in her face. I could have articulated the pain of those first weeks after she'd left me, the nights I'd spent wondering if she was right, if I really wasn't enough. But I'd learned something important over the past 9 months. Revenge isn't about destruction. True revenge is about becoming something better than the person who hurt you. You made several terrible mistakes, I said calmly, but they're not my mistakes to fix. You lied, Claire, to me, to your colleagues, to your father. You built everything on those lies, and lies have the same structural integrity as sand. She flinched. What you're feeling right now isn't my responsibility. What you do next is entirely your choice. But I would suggest starting with the truth. Sophie in analytics. You humiliated her and lied about her performance. Start there, then move on to the others. Will that fix things? She asked, and the hope in her voice was almost painful to hear. No, I said, it won't fix everything, but it's where repair actually begins. And Claire? I looked at her directly. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I need to be free of you. Holding on to anger would mean you still have power over me. I'm not giving you that anymore. She left my office 20 minutes later, her shoulders bent, her certainty finally cracked open by reality. I turned back to my work, and I felt the weight of those 9 months settle into place. The anger was gone. The rage had transmuted into something stronger, something more valuable. The quiet certainty of a man who'd taken his power back. 6 months after that conversation, I was sitting in Bernard's office, but this time we weren't playing chess. We were signing papers. I was being promoted to Vice President of Strategic Development. The company was creating a position specifically for me, with a compensation package that finally reflected my actual value. James Ricci had championed it. Bernard had engineered it. David Mueller from Meridian Industries had personally called Richard Chun to endorse the decision. My father called me that night. I hadn't spoken to him since he'd attended the company gala and seen me receive that standing ovation. He'd been distant then, careful, unsure if this was real or some temporary victory. "I'm proud of you, son," he said, and I could hear the emotion in his voice. "I always was. I just want to tell you that. After everything with Claire, I wanted to make sure you knew." "I know, Dad," I said, and meant it in a way I hadn't been able to mean it before. Because here's what I learned. You can't build self-worth on someone else's admiration or destruction. You can only build it on the truth of who you are and what you're capable of. Claire, 6 months into her journey of actual accountability, had been moved to a different company. She left Morrison & Associates with a reference letter that was technically positive, but carefully worded to damn her with professional distance. She was starting over, and from what I'd heard, she was actually doing the work of becoming a better person. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't think about her when I woke up. She become what everyone becomes when you stop giving them your energy, irrelevant. I stood at the window of my new office on the 42nd floor of the Morrison & Associates building, looking out at the Manhattan skyline as the sun set. My corner office, my view, my success. It hadn't come from destroying her. It had come from refusing to be destroyed. The irony, I'd come to understand, was that Claire had given me the greatest gift. She'd shown me exactly who I didn't want to be. She'd demonstrated with perfect clarity what happens when you build your life on lies and manipulation and the belief that you are untouchable. And then she'd unintentionally show me the opposite. What happens when you build your life on truth, integrity, and genuine competence? I picked up my phone and called Bernard. "Fancy a game of chess?" I asked. "Only if you're prepared to lose," he said, laughing. "But yes, tonight." Tonight, I confirmed, because at the end of everything, it wasn't about revenge. It was about becoming a man I could respect. It was about rebuilding myself into someone who didn't need Claire's destruction to feel whole. That was the real victory. That was the real power. And it was mine. I learned something sitting in that corner office, watching the Manhattan sunset. Respect is non-negotiable, and your worth isn't defined by anyone else's seating chart. Not by who gets the credit. Not by who your family believes first. Not by the CEO on someone else's arm. My silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. My patience wasn't acceptance. It was power. And my survival proved that sometimes the quietest revolution is the most devastating. If you've been gaslit into invisibility, if someone convinced you that you weren't enough, I'm telling you now, your silence doesn't make you weak. Your boundaries don't make you difficult. Your refusal to play their game makes you extraordinary. The people who matter will eventually see what the manipulators try to hide. And the world always recognizes truth eventually. You don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to be undeniably, unquestionably excellent. Subscribe for more stories about setting boundaries, reclaiming your worth, and turning humiliation into triumph. Because the real revolution happens when you decide to write your own ending. Your worth was never in question, Elliot. It was only ever waiting to be remembered. Now go remember it.